The wind howling through the packed square of the iron woods carried the bitter bite of early frost, but it was nothing compared to the absolute coldness radiating from the stone platform. Hundreds of wolves stood in the courtyard, their murmurs a low, dangerous rumble that echoed off the high fortress walls. They had gathered for an execution of character, waiting for their Lycan King to pass judgment. At the center of the square stood Naya. She did not look like a monster. She did not look like a dark witch capable of bringing a kingdom to its knees. Dressed in the coarse, ash-colored linen of the servant caste, she looked terribly small against the massive iron pillars that surrounded her. Her long, ink-black hair whipped across her pale face, but she did not raise her bound hands to brush it away. She simply stood there, perfectly still, her dark eyes fixed on the man towering above her on the dais. Alpha King Orion. He was a mountain of a man, a heavily scarred Lycan warlord whose very presence demanded submission. His steely grey eyes looked down at her with a mixture of disgust and a strange, flickering fury he seemed barely able to control. Beside him stood Vesper, the beater's daughter, draped in heavy winter furs. An unnervingly sweet, floral scent rolled off Vesper's skin, a scent Orion's council had blindly accepted as the true mate bond. "You stand before the Iron Woods as a traitor!" Orion's voice boomed, shattering the low murmurs of the crowd. The sheer force of his alpha aura pressed down on the square, forcing weaker wolves to lower their heads. Nia did not bow. "You used forbidden blood magic to forge a sacred mating bracelet," Orion continued, his jaw locking with barely contained violence. "You attempted to bind the Lycan King to a barren servant, rotting your own womb in the process with your dark arts. You sought to leave this kingdom without an heir, to weaken us from the inside." Every word was a blade, striking precisely where the pack's fears lay. The crowd began to jeer, spitting insults at her feet. "Witch, Omega trash, traitor." Nia heard them, but the sounds felt entirely distant. Beneath the thick, ragged bandages wrapping her left wrist, her skin throbbed with a dull, agonizing ache. They called it dark magic. They did not know about the assassin in the shadows 3 years ago. They did not know about the lethal curse meant for the king's heart, a curse she had willingly intercepted through the mate bond, trapping the fatal magic inside her own body to save his life. The curse had burned her womb to ashes and charred her flesh, leaving her a broken vessel. She had sacrificed her future so Orion could have his, and this was her reward. "The penalty for forging a mate bond is death." Orion's voice dropped lower, turning dangerously quiet. His massive hands gripped the stone railing of the dais. "But you were once under the protection of this house. You will not be executed. You are stripped of your pack name and banished from the Iron Woods. If you are seen within our borders by nightfall, my guards will hunt you down." Vesper leaned closer to Orion, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. "Be grateful for the king's mercy, servant." Nia did not look at Vesper. Her gaze remained locked on Orion. For a fleeting second, the massive Lycan's breath hitched, his inner wolf clawing frantically against his ribs in a sudden, violent panic. Orion forced the sensation down, blaming it on the tension of the crowd. Slowly, Nia raised her hands. The guards flanking her stepped forward, hands on their weapons, but Orion raised a single finger, ordering them to halt. With quiet, deliberate movements, Nia began to unwrap the dirty bandages on her left wrist. The linen fell away, revealing skin that was heavily scarred, mottled with deep, unnatural burns. But it was not the scars that silenced the crowd. It was what she held in her hand. She slid a heavy ring of metal off her wrist and stepped forward, placing it on the cold, ceremonial stone block at the base of the dais. It clattered loudly in the dead silence of the courtyard. It was the mating bracelet. But it was not the shining silver band of a Lycan King's mate. It was warped, entirely blackened and charred, like it had been pulled from the heart of a volcanic forge. Nia looked up at Orion one last time. There were no tears in her soulful dark eyes, no desperate pleas for him to see the truth, only a quiet, devastating acceptance. "I leave you to your truth, Alpha," she said. Her voice was not loud, but in the absolute silence, it carried to every corner of the square. She turned her back on the Lycan King. She did not run. She walked toward the heavy iron gates with the slow, unbending grace of a queen who needed no crown to prove her worth. The crowd parted instinctively, pulling back as if afraid to touch her. Orion watched her small figure shrink into the distance. He opened his mouth to formally declare the exile complete, to announce Vesper as his Luna and seal the future of the Iron Woods. But the words never came. The heavy iron gates slammed shut with a deafening clang. The exact moment the metal struck, a sudden, blinding agony ripped through Orion's chest. It was not a physical wound, but a violent tearing sensation inside his very soul, as if a vital organ had just been forcefully ripped from his body. He gasped, a horrific, breathless sound, and staggered forward. His knees hit the stone dais with a heavy crack. One massive hand gripped his chest, his eyes widening in absolute shock, as the sweet scent of Vesper suddenly made his stomach heave with violent nausea. The silent veil earned its name. Located at the very edge of the Lycan territories, it was a harsh, fog-draped borderland where the pines grew twisted and the soil was stubborn. But to Nia, the silence was a gift. She found an abandoned trapper's cabin near a frozen stream. Her body ached with a bone-deep exhaustion, and her left wrist throbbed with a hollow, phantom pain where the charred metal used to rest. The physical distance from Orion had dulled the sharpest edges of the severed bond, reducing the agony to a persistent, heavy ache in her ribs. She did not sit down to weep. She did not look back toward the iron gates that had shut her out. Instead, Nia gathered dry wood, struck a flint, and coaxed a small fire to life in the stone hearth. She began to clean. She gathered bitter roots from the frozen earth outside, crushing them into a paste to soothe the raw flesh of her wrist. She was a servant no longer. She was simply a survivor. The crown had stripped her of her home, but it could not strip her of her resilience. Back at the Iron Woods, resilience was fracturing. The great hall of the Lycan King felt suffocating. The victory banquet, meant to celebrate the banishment of the traitor and the rise of the new Luna, was tense and quiet. Orion sat at the head of the heavy oak table, staring blankly at his silver goblet. Vesper sat beside him, dressed in luxurious velvet. She reached out, her manicured fingers brushing against Orion's arm.
No.
My king, you have barely touched your wine.
Just listen.
The kingdom is safe now. We should celebrate. The moment her skin touched his, a low, guttural snarl vibrated in Orion's chest. It was not a conscious reaction. His inner Lycan violently recoiled, its hackles raised in pure, unadulterated hostility. Orion pulled his arm away so sharply that his goblet tipped over, spilling dark red wine across the table like a fresh wound. Vesper flinched, her confident smile faltering, the sweet, floral scent rolling off her skin. The scent that had once convinced his rational mind she was his fated mate now felt cloying. It smelled artificial. It smelled wrong. "Leave me," Orion commanded, his voice a low gravel that left no room for argument. He did not go to his chambers. Instead, driven by a restless, gnawing anxiety he could not name, Orion walked out into the biting cold of the Pack Square. The courtyard was empty, bathed in the pale light of a crescent moon. He walked directly to the stone dais. The charred bracelet still lay exactly where Nia had left it. The beta had advised him to have it smelted down or thrown into the river, calling it a cursed object of dark magic, but Orion had forbidden it. Standing over the ruined metal, he took a slow breath. He expected to smell the foul, sulphurous stench of dark witchcraft, the kind his beta claimed Nia had used. But there was no sulphur. There was only the faint, tragic scent of burnt wood and crushed ashes. It smelled like a forest that had sacrificed itself to a wildfire. It smelled like quiet suffering. "Guard," Orion barked. A sentry stepped out of the shadows immediately, bowing low. "No one touches this stone. No one moves this bracelet. If a single flake of ash is disturbed, I will have your head." "Yes, Alpha," the guard stammered, terrified by the raw intensity in the king's eyes. Orion finally retreated to his chambers, but sleep refused to come. The massive Lycan paced the stone floor, his chest heaving as if the air in the room was too thin. The pain he had felt when the gates closed behind Nia had subsided, but it had left a terrible emptiness in its wake. Midnight chimed from the courtyard bell. Suddenly, Orion stopped pacing. A sharp, burning sensation pierced the center of his chest. It was not the hollow ache of the mate bond. It was a precise, localized agony right over his heart. With a ragged breath, Orion gripped the collar of his tunic and ripped it open. There, directly over his heart, was the faded, jagged scar from the assassin's blade 3 years ago. The blade that was supposed to kill him, but miraculously hadn't. Only now, the old silvered tissue was raised and angry. As Orion stared in horrified silence, the skin split open, weeping a single thick drop of viscous black blood. The curse had returned, and the shield was gone. By dawn, Orion's bedsheets were stained with a terrifying secret. The single drop of black blood from his old chest scar had not stopped. It had slowly seeped through the night, carrying with it a feverish, unnatural heat.
I have been expecting you.
The assassin's blade from 3 years ago was supposed to be a memory, a failed attempt on the Lycan King's life. But as Orion stared at his reflection in the heavy iron mirror, he realized the blade had carried a delayed execution. A curse. But if the curse was fatal, why had he survived for 3 years? And why was it only waking up now? The answer hovered at the edge of his mind,
belonged to
a
him.
terrifying shadow he was too proud to look at directly. He threw on a dark tunic, concealing the weeping scar, and stormed out of his chambers. His boots hit the stone corridors with heavy, aggressive thuds. The castle servants pressed themselves against the walls, terrified by the sheer, volatile force of his alpha aura. He found himself back at the Pack Square. The dawn light was grey and unforgiving, illuminating the charred mating bracelet still resting on the ceremonial block. "My king." Orion turned to see his beater approaching, flanked by 2 guards. The older wolf looked at the blackened metal on the stone with overt disgust. "You did not sleep well," the beater noted, his eyes narrowing slightly at the tension radiating from Orion's broad shoulders. "It is the witch's lingering hex. She left that cursed object to poison the air of the Iron Woods. Allow me to have it cast into the smelter, Alpha. We must purge her dark magic completely, so you and Vesper can truly lead." Orion looked at the beta. A week ago, he would have nodded. He would have let his trusted second-in-command handle the remnants of a traitor. But today, the heavy scent of Vesper's floral perfume clung to the beta's cloak, and the scent of burnt wood called out from the stone block. His Lycan wolf growled, a low, rumbling warning in his chest. "Do not let him touch it." "Step back," Orion commanded. "Alpha, it is dangerous." "I said step back!" Orion roared. His voice cracked like thunder across the empty square, forcing the beta and the guards to immediately avert their eyes and bare their throats in submission.
I will not
Breathing heavily,
forget this.
Orion turned back to the stone block. His massive,
Nor
battle-scarred
him.
hand hovered over the twisted, blackened metal.
He
His mind
deserves
told him it was
better
forbidden.
than
His
this.
pride told him it was the weapon of a traitor. But his
I will
soul,
not forget
the primal,
this.
undeniable instinct of a Lycan King,
Nor
demanded
him.
the truth. He closed his hand around the charred
He
bracelet.
deserves better
The
than
reaction was
this.
instantaneous. A tidal wave of phantom agony blasted through Orion's nervous system. It was not a physical strike, but a sensory memory locked deep within the warped metal. His vision flashed white. He could feel it, the exact terrifying sensation of dark poison entering a bloodstream. But it was not his bloodstream. He felt the searing heat of the assassin's curse, but he felt it being violently pulled away, absorbed into a smaller, frailer body. He felt the terrifying sensation of a womb burning to ash from the inside out. He felt the agonizing 3 years of waking up every single morning with veins on fire, hiding the pain beneath the coarse, ash-colored linen of a servant's dress. He felt the quiet, crushing loneliness of wrapping thick bandages around a decaying wrist, all to protect a king who did not know he was being protected. It wasn't dark magic she had cast. It was a curse she had caught. Nia had not forged a fake mate bond. She had used a true, fated mate bond, the most sacred connection known to their kind, as a conduit to siphon the death meant for him into herself. She was barren because she had sacrificed her ability to create life to preserve his. The silent shield-ife to preserve his. The silent shield.
You.
The vision shattered, leaving Orion
weren't
gasping for
supposed to
air.
find this.
The heavy metal bracelet clattered from his trembling fingers, hitting the stone. The Alpha King of the Iron Woods, the warlord who had never bowed to any enemy, dropped heavily to his knees.
To find this.
The stone cracked slightly under his weight. He clutched his chest, digging his
failed
fingers into
them.
his tunic, right over the weeping black scar.
All of
"My
them.
king!" the beta shouted, rushing forward. The hex! I told you it was a trap! Orion raised his head. His steely grey eyes were wide, utterly hollowed out by a devastation so profound it fractured his very pride into dust.
And I can never
He looked at the
undo
beater,
it.
seeing for the first time the calculated panic in the older man's eyes. "She didn't curse me," Orion whispered, his voice cracking, a sound of pure, unadulterated horror. "She was keeping me alive." The air in the silent vale tasted of pine needles and unburdened snow. For the first time in 3 years, Nia woke up without the suffocating sensation of fire in her veins. Sitting by the hearth in her small, drafty cabin, she carefully unspooled the fresh linen around her left wrist. The distance from the iron woods, combined with the severing of the physical bracelet, had finally stopped the curse from feeding on her life force. The blackened, charred flesh that had once earned her the title of a dark witch was beginning to flake away, like dead bark falling from a healing tree. Nia gently washed her wrist with warm water and a tincture of crushed willow bark. As the ash and dead skin washed away, a faint, pure silver mark was revealed beneath the surface. It was the shape of a crescent moon, delicate and undeniable. The true mark of the Lycan King's fated mate. It had been there all along, buried under the ugly, agonizing burns of the assassin's curse she had absorbed for him. Nia stared at the silver crescent for a long moment. She did not smile, nor did she cry. She simply pulled a clean linen strip and wrapped her wrist again, covering the mark. She did not need a symbol on her skin to know who she was. A timid knock at her wooden door broke the silence. Nia opened it to find 2 rogue wolves, a battered older male, and a young, shivering omega with a deep gash on her leg. They had been cast out by a neighboring pack, drawn to the silent vale by rumors of a healer who asked for no coin. "Please," the older wolf rasped, his eyes downcast in submission. "We have nowhere else." Nia stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Bring her to the fire." She did not demand a bow. She did not command them with an alpha's heavy aura, but as she knelt on the hard wooden floor, deftly cleaning the young omega's wound and offering them hot broth, the 2 outcasts looked at her with profound, desperate reverence. True lunar energy was not about sitting on a stone dais draped in velvet. It was about being the anchor for those who had nothing left. Nia had lost a kingdom, but she had not lost her dignity. Miles away, the iron woods was drowning in tension. Orion sat in the war room, his massive frame casting a long, intimidating shadow across the tactical maps. Underneath his thick leather tunic, the old scar over his heart continued to weep slow, agonizing drops of black blood. The physical pain was a constant, searing burn, but it paled in comparison to the crushing guilt threatening to tear his mind apart. She was keeping me alive. The war room doors opened, and the beater entered, carrying a ledger of preparations for the upcoming lunar coronation.
We owe you everything. Thank you, truly. You are welcome. Be safe on your journey.
He looked overly confident, unaware of the revelation that had shattered Orion's reality at the stone dais just hours ago. Alpha, the beta began smoothly. The High Council has agreed on the coronation date. Vesper's ceremonial robes are being tailored. We only need your seal on the final... Halt the preparations, Orion interrupted. His voice was not a roar, but a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated the heavy oak table. The beta froze. My king? Cancel the seamstresses. Disperse the High Council. There will be no coronation. Orion slowly raised his steely grey eyes to meet his second-in-command's. Not until I am satisfied. Satisfied with what, Alpha? The traitor is gone. Vesper is your fated. I want the scrolls from the assassination attempt 3 years ago, Orion said, cutting him off with razor-sharp precision. I want the name of every guard on duty that night. I want the alchemical breakdown of the poison the assassin used. Bring it to my chambers by nightfall. The beta's face paled, his confident posture crumbling for a fraction of a second. Orion's Lycan instincts flared. The older wolf smelled of sudden, sour fear. Yes, Alpha, the beta choked out, bowing stiffly before retreating from the room. In a lavishly decorated chamber down the hall, Vesper paced frantically. Her father, the beta, had just delivered the news. The coronation was halted. Orion was digging into the past. He's pulling away, Vesper whispered, her manicured nails digging into her palms. He didn't even look at me this morning. The scent, it's wearing off. She hurried to her vanity, her hands trembling as she unlocked a hidden compartment in the velvet-lined drawer. She pulled out a small, delicate glass vial. Inside swirled a shimmering, iridescent liquid, a rare, highly illegal love potion her father had procured from the southern witches. It was the only reason she smelled like a fated mate. It was the only reason Orion's wolf had ever tolerated her presence. But the dose was fading, and Orion's suspicion was growing. Vesper uncorked the vial, her eyes frantic and cold. If Orion found out the truth about the assassination, her father would be executed. If he found out she was a false mate, she would be torn apart by the pack. She poured a heavy dose of the potion into a silver goblet of wine. I won't lose this crown to a banished servant, she hissed to the empty room. She picked up the silver tray. Tonight, she would drug the Lycan King, and by tomorrow, he would gladly seal her place on the throne forever. The fire roaring in the hearth of the king's chambers offered no warmth. Orion knelt on the heavy fur rug, his broad chest heaving as he fought for air. He was burning and freezing at the same time. The scar over his heart was no longer just weeping.
Let it be done.
It pulsed with a dark, necrotic heat that spread through his veins like liquid lead. Without Nia to act as his silent shield, the 3-year-old assassin's curse was finally unleashed, tearing through his Lycan healing factor with terrifying speed. Every beat of his heart felt like swallowing glass.
For the kingdom.
He gripped the edge of a heavy oak table, his knuckles turning white as a low, ragged groan escaped his throat. How did she survive this? The thought echoed in his feverish mind. How did she wake up every single day in this agony and still look at me without hatred? The heavy wooden doors creaked open. Orion forced himself up, throwing a dark cloak over his shoulders to hide the bleeding scar. Vesper stepped into the room, holding a silver tray with a single ornate goblet of dark wine. The cloying, aggressively sweet floral scent she always carried preceded her, thick and suffocating. "My king," Vesper said softly, her voice dripping with practiced concern. "The guard said you refused your evening meal. You look pale. Please, drink this. It will soothe your nerves."
The burden
She moved
is
closer,
mine.
the silk of her gown rustling. As she approached,
I
the
must
sweet
face
scent
it.
hit Orion's senses, but this time it did not trigger the instinctual comfort of a mate. Instead, his inner Lycan
burden is
violently
mine.
recoiled. The beast inside him remembered the touch of the charred
I
bracelet.
must face
It remembered the tragic, authentic scent of burnt wood and quiet sacrifice. The floral perfume rolling off Vesper suddenly smelled sickeningly artificial. It smelled like a trap. "I do not want wine, Vesper." Orion ground out, his voice hoarse from the pain in his chest. "Leave." "You are pushing me away, Alpha," Vesper insisted, stepping into his personal space. She reached out, pressing the cold silver goblet into his trembling hand. "I am your fated mate. Let me comfort you. Drink."
Please take it.
She placed her free hand on his chest, directly over where his scar burned beneath the cloak.
won't.
The contact was the spark that ignited the powder keg. A deafening, monstrous snarl ripped from Orion's throat. His Lycan instincts, fueled by the agonizing pain of the curse
I
and the
won't.
overwhelming stench of deceit, seized control. With a vicious swipe of his arm, Orion slapped the goblet away. The heavy silver cup flew across the room, smashing against the stone wall. The dark red wine splashed across the floor, but it did not simply pool. The liquid hit the cold stones and immediately began to sizzle. A strange, iridescent vapor hissed upward, sparkling unnaturally in the
think not,
firelight,
Your Grace.
before evaporating into
Step
nothingness.
back.
Orion froze. Vesper froze.
Have no fear, my
In the span of 3
It
seconds,
is merely
the heavy,
a toast.
intoxicating floral scent
I
that had
think
defined
not,
Vesper's
Your
presence for the
Grace.
last month
Step
completely
back.
vanished. It was wiped from the air as if it had never
Have no
existed.
fear, my
Stripped of the alchemical
It is
illusion,
merely a toast.
Vesper's true scent hit Orion's nose. It was ordinary, sour with sudden terror, and entirely devoid of the sacred resonance of a true mate. The silence in the chamber was absolute, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the ragged, heavy breathing of the Lycan King. Orion looked at the sizzling stain on the stone floor, then back to the terrified woman standing before him. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with devastating clarity. The accusations against Nia, the conveniently timed appearance of Vesper's mate scent, the beater's insistence on destroying the charred bracelet.
Again.
Nia had not forged a mate bond. Vesper had.
You to stay.
A love potion, Orion whispered, the words sounding more terrifying in their quiet realization than any roar.
Do not defy
You
me
used a
again.
southern witch's potion to fake the scent of a true mate.
Peace is fit.
Vesper backed away, her face drained of
All
all
of it.
color. Orion, please, I can explain. In a blur of motion too fast for the human eye to track, Orion crossed the room.
The
His
peace is
massive,
fit.
battle-scarred hand clamped around Vesper's throat,
All of
lifting her off, her feet. He didn't crush her windpipe, but the threat of instant death radiated from his glowing, steely grey eyes. The sheer force of his alpha aura slammed into her, a suffocating weight of pure, murderous betrayal. You stood on that dais, Orion snarled, his voice a demonic rasp, his face inches from hers. You stood there and watched me banish the woman who was dying to save my life. You let me call her a witch, while you carried poison in your hands. Tears streamed down Vesper's face as she clawed weakly at his iron grip. Orion's eyes shifted from human grey to the solid, terrifying amber of his Lycan beast.
I know everything.
Give me one reason, he growled, the walls vibrating with the sound. Why I shouldn't tear you apart right here. The great iron bell of the fortress tolled at 2 a.m, a deep, mournful sound that shattered the stillness of the iron woods. It was the summons of the Alpha King, a call that demanded immediate presence. From their beds and barracks, the wolves of the pack poured into the pack square, shivering in the biting frost. Confusion hung thick in the air, but it was quickly swallowed by a suffocating wave of dread. The alpha aura rolling off the stone dais was absolute, crushing and devoid of any mercy. Orion stood exactly where he had stood a week ago. He wore no royal furs, only a dark tunic hastily thrown over his shoulders. His face was a mask of cold, lethal stone. At his feet, Vesper sobbed quietly into the frozen dirt, her lavish velvet gown stained with mud. A moment later, the heavy wooden doors of the keep opened, and 2 elite royal guards dragged the beta forward, throwing him onto the dais beside his daughter. The murmurs of the pack died instantly. My king, the beta stammered, looking wildly from the weeping Vesper to the terrifying stillness of Orion. What is the meaning of this? Why is my daughter on the ground? Because she no longer has a place by my side. Orion's voice echoed across the square, dangerously soft, yet heard by every single wolf. And neither do you. Orion stepped forward, holding up a small piece of shattered glass he had retrieved from his chambers. For a month, this pack believed the moon goddess had blessed us with a true Luna. We celebrated her scent. We cheered for her coronation. He dropped the glass shards onto the stone. It was an illusion. A southern witch's love potion, administered to blind my wolf and steal my throne. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. The absolute worst crime in Lycan law was the manipulation of a fated bond. I did it for you, Father! Vesper wailed, clutching at the beta's boots. He was going to find out! The scent was fading! The beta's face turned the color of ash. He tried to scramble backward, but the royal guards crossed their spears behind him, locking him in place. The potion is only the beginning of your treason, Orion continued, his steely eyes pinning the beta down like physical weights. He turned to the crowd, raising his voice so the entire square could hear his next words. He had to say it. He had to force himself to speak the truth that tore his own pride to shreds. 3 years ago, an assassin's blade pierced my chest. We believed the assassin failed. We were wrong. The blade carried a necrotic curse, a slow-acting poison meant to rot the Lycan King from the inside out. Orion pressed a hand over his heart, where the black blood still wept beneath his tunic. I survived, only because someone else took the curse for me. Someone used a true fated mate bond as a shield to draw the dark magic into her own body. The silence in the courtyard was
I
absolute.
cannot protect
Not a single
them
wolf dared to
anymore.
breathe. She woke up every day with her veins on fire.
Time has
Orion's
come.
voice cracked, the raw agony of his guilt spilling over. The curse
Yes,
burned
it
her
has.
womb. It charred her flesh.
We are ready.
It turned the sacred metal of her mating bracelet black.
Time has come.
And how did we repay our savior? Orion pointed a massive, trembling
Yes,
finger at the
it
stone block
has.
where Nia had stood a week prior.
We are ready.
We dragged her out here. We called her an Omega. We called her a witch. I publicly humiliated the woman who traded her life for mine, while the real architect of the curse stood beside me, waiting to claim the crown. The beta shook his head frantically. Alpha, no. You cannot believe a servant over your own bloodline. I felt it! Orion roared, the Lycan beast finally breaking through his control. The sheer volume of the sound forced half the pack to their knees in instinctual submission. I touched the charred metal. I felt the agony she endured while you whispered lies in my ear. Orion stalked toward the beta, towering over the older man. He did not extend his claws. He did not tear the traitor's throat out. Death was too quick, too merciful. You are stripped of your rank, Orion decreed, his words falling like heavy iron anvils. You are stripped of your pack name, your lands, and your honor. You and your daughter will rot in the deep cells until the council decides the length of your suffering. Take them out of my sight. The guards hauled the screaming Vesper and the weeping Beta away, dragging them into the dark maw of the dungeons. The pack square was left in a haunting, heavy silence. The realization of what they had done, what they had cheered for, crashed over the crowd.
No.
The wolves who had spat insults at Nia now stared at the cold stone block with profound, sickening shame. They had banished their true Luna.
No physical.
Orion stood
I
alone
will
on the
not
dais.
take it.
Justice had been served to the traitors, but it brought him no peace. Without the adrenaline of the
said
confrontation,
no.
the reality of his physical
Leave
condition
me.
caught up to him.
No
The curse,
physical.
no longer held back
I
by
will
Nia's
not
silent
take
shield,
it.
surged violently through his chest. It felt like 1,000 burning needles
I said
piercing his
no.
heart simultaneously.
Leave me.
Orion gasped, a terrible, wet sound. The Lycan King staggered backward, his massive legs giving out beneath him. He crashed to his knees, his hands clawing at his chest as black blood seeped through his dark tunic, staining the fabric. "Alpha!" a guard shouted, breaking ranks. Orion couldn't hear him. His vision blurred, the cold edges of the pack square fading into darkness. As his massive frame collapsed onto the freezing stone, only one word escaped his lips, a broken, desperate prayer into the empty night. Nia. The Royal Infirmary of the Iron Woods smelled of bitter antiseptic and panic. The High Physician's hands trembled violently as he pressed poultices against the weeping black scar on the Alpha King's chest. The curse was spreading, carving dark, jagged lines through Orion's heavily muscled torso, like toxic roots taking hold in a dying tree. "My king, you must stay still," the physician pleaded, his voice cracking. "The necrotic magic is eating through your Lycan healing. If we do not stabilize your core by nightfall, your heart will fail." Orion did not answer. He sat up, his massive chest heaving, and batted the physician's hands away with a fraction of his usual strength. Even weakened, his alpha presence was absolute. "Do not waste your herbs," Orion rumbled, his voice a gravelly echo of its former power. "This is not a wound meant to be healed by you." He reached for his dark leather tunic, pulling it over his broad shoulders to hide the spreading black veins. He ignored the gasps of his council members who had gathered at the door. He ignored their desperate pleas to remain in the fortress, to send an armed escort, to order the banished traitor back to do her duty. "She is no traitor," Orion snapped, the sheer force of his glare silencing the council. "And I am not sending soldiers to drag an innocent woman back to a cage. If I am to die, I will die looking at the only truth this kingdom had left." Orion picked up the charred mating bracelet from the bedside table. He curled his massive, scarred fingers around the warped metal, allowing its rough, burnt edges to bite into his palm. He pulled his heavy fur cloak around his shoulders and walked out into the freezing dawn, entirely alone. The journey to the Silent Vale was grueling. It was a path Nia had walked just a week prior, cast out with nothing but the clothes on her back and the condemnation of a kingdom. Now, the Alpha King walked the exact same road, stripped of his pride and hunted by his own failing body. Every mile was an agonizing lesson in accountability. The cold winter wind whipped through the trees, but Orion barely felt it. His internal temperature was a raging inferno. The curse burned in his chest with the intensity of a blacksmith's forge. Each time he took a deep breath, it felt as though hot needles were being driven directly into his lungs. His massive legs, which had carried him through countless wars, grew heavy and uncoordinated. He stumbled over exposed tree roots. He fell to his knees in the frozen mud. She lived like this for 3 years, he thought, his vision swimming with black spots as he forced himself to stand again. She smiled at me. She served my court. She listened to the pack call her worthless, all while swallowing this fire. The sheer weight of the guilt was heavier than the curse itself. It was a suffocating, crushing realization that his pride, his rigid belief in what power should look like, had completely blinded him to the most profound display of strength he would ever witness in his lifetime. By the time the twisted pines gave way to the softer, fog-draped borders of the Silent Vale, Orion was barely walking. He was dragging his massive frame through the snow, his breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. The fog began to part, revealing a small, modest cabin near a frozen stream. There, kneeling beside a patch of winter-resistant herbs, was Nia. Orion stopped. Even through his fading vision, the sight of her struck him with the force of a physical blow. She did not look like the frail, ash-covered servant he had banished from the Pack Square. Dressed in a simple, warm woolen dress, her ink-black hair was tied back, catching the pale winter sunlight. The dark circles under her eyes were gone. The posture of constant, quiet suffering had vanished. She looked vibrant. She looked peaceful. She looked entirely free of him. "I saved his life once," Nia continued, her gaze sweeping over the guards
My
who had once
king,
watched her humiliation in
I
silence.
beg of you,
I burned from the inside
not
out for
go
3
alone.
years so that your king could
let
stand
us
tall.
protect you,
And he paid me
as
with
is our
public
sworn
degradation.
duty.
He dragged me before the pack,
My king,
stripped me of my dignity,
I
and
beg
cast
of
me
you,
into the winter while he held a
do
liar
not
at
go
his side.
alone.
He was
Let us
deceived.
protect
A guard
you,
protested weakly.
as is our sworn
He chose his
duty.
pride over his instincts. Nia corrected, her tone devoid of pity. She looked down at the unconscious Orion. I will not be the sacrificial lamb for the Iron Woods ever again. Whatever life he has left, he must keep it himself. The captain's expression shifted from desperation to a frantic, instinctual anger. He stood up, taking a step toward her. He is your Alpha. You are bound to him. You will take this curse even if we have to force... Halt. The word was barely a whisper, a ragged, wet rasp that sounded like grinding stones, but it carried an absolute, terrifying command. The captain froze. Orion was conscious. His steely grey eyes were half open, clouded with excruciating pain and fever, but they were fixed entirely on the captain. Even lying in the mud, dying from a necrotic curse, his Lycan aura flared with enough protective fury to force the guard to take a step back, baring his throat in instant submission. Orion dragged his heavy arm across the frozen mud. His massive, dirt-caked hand reached out, his thick fingers wrapping weakly around the hem of Nia's woolen dress. He didn't look at his guards. He looked up at Nia. The arrogance, the blinding pride of the warlord king was entirely gone, burned away by the curse and the crushing weight of his own guilt. Do not touch her, Orion rasped to his men, every syllable costing him a violent shudder of pain.
Stop.
He pulled gently on the fabric of Nia's dress, his eyes locked onto hers with absolute remorse.
I swear.
Don't save me, he whispered, his voice breaking. Just let me stay.
Rise, my
Orion
king,
did not die
you
that
are
night,
absolved.
though his survival defied all medical logic of their
I
kind.
swear filthy.
He also fiercely refused to be moved. When the royal guards attempted to lift his massive frame onto a stretcher to carry him back to the
Rise, my
Iron Woods,
king,
the
you
dying
are
Lycan King
absolved.
let out a warning snarl, so dark and absolute that the men dropped to their knees in terror. He dragged himself to the base of a great ancient pine, sitting exactly on the boundary line of Nia's herb garden. He leaned his broad, heavy back against the rough bark, facing outward toward the dense forest, positioning himself as a physical barrier between the untamed wilds and her home. He asked for no blankets, no water, and certainly no magic. He simply sat in the freezing dirt, clutching the charred mating bracelet in his massive, trembling hand, keeping a silent, agonizing watch over the woman he had wronged. Nia watched him from her window as the night bled into dawn. She saw the warlord who had once commanded armies shivering in the frost. She watched his chest heave with the torturous effort of fighting a curse that was slowly rotting his heart. He did not call out to her. He did not demand her mercy. For a man who had lived his entire life equating power with absolute control, this was the ultimate submission. He was taking accountability, not with words, but with his very life. As the first pale light of morning broke through the fog, a low, rhythmic thrumming sound vibrated through the frozen earth. Nia stepped out onto her porch. From the mist of the forest edge, figures began to emerge. It was not a small detachment of guards. It was the vast, imposing bulk of the Iron Woods pack. Hundreds of elite Lycan warriors, elders wrapped in thick furs, and ordinary citizens had marched through the night. They had heard the decree at the pack square. They had witnessed the fall of the beater and the false Luna, and they knew their king was dying in exile. The massive crowd stopped at the edge of the clearing. They saw Orion, their invincible alpha, slumped against a tree, his tunic stained black with necrotic blood, his steely eyes barely open. And then they looked past him. They looked at Nia. She stood on the wooden steps of her cabin, wearing no crown, draped in no velvet. She was just a woman in a simple woolen dress, but the quiet, unyielding strength in her posture, the sheer, undeniable dignity radiating from her small frame, was more commanding than any royal decree they had ever witnessed. An elder in the front row, a wolf who had stood silently on the dais while she was banished, took a trembling step forward. He did not speak. He simply lowered his gaze to the frozen dirt and dropped to his knees. Behind him, a seasoned warrior lowered his spear and knelt, then another and another. Like a wave crashing across a silent ocean, the entire Iron Woods pack, hundreds of proud, fierce Lycans, who had once spat her name and called her an Omega, fell to their knees in the snow. They bowed their heads, baring their necks in the ultimate display of submission and profound collective shame. The absolute silence of their regret was deafening. They were not kneeling to a magical white queen. They were kneeling to the truth they had been too blind to see. Nia looked out over the sea of bowed heads. She felt no triumphant joy, only a quiet, heavy closure. The dignity they had tried to strip from her at the pack square had returned to them as a mirror, reflecting their own failure. Suddenly, a wet, agonizing choke shattered the silence. At the base of the pine tree, Orion's body convulsed violently. The charred bracelet slipped from his grip. The black veins of the curse surged with terrifying speed, crawling up his thick neck and branching toward his jawline. His steely grey eyes rolled back, and his massive frame slid sideways, collapsing fully into the frozen mud. The curse had reached his heart. A collective, horrified gasp rippled through the kneeling pack, but no one dared to break rank. The Lycan King lay motionless in the mud, the necrotic black veins creeping up his throat like suffocating vines. The air grew icy, heavy with the undeniable scent of death. Nia moved. She did not run, but her steps were deliberate and swift. She descended the wooden porch, walking past the bowed heads of the elite guards, and sank to her knees in the freezing dirt beside Orion. His massive chest was still, his steely grey eyes closed. For 3 years, she had loved a king who could not see her. For a week, she had despised a man who had humiliated her. But looking at him now, stripped of his crown, his pride broken, dying alone in the mud just to keep a silent watch over her door, the last wall of ice around her heart finally melted. He had paid his debt. He had learned the agonizing weight of the truth. Nia did not press her hands to his chest to absorb the dark magic. She would never be an empty vessel again. Instead, she reached into the dirt and picked up the charred mating bracelet. It was freezing, coated in black ash and sorrow. Next, she reached for the small pruning knife she kept in her apron pocket. With a swift, unflinching motion, she drew the blade across the palm of her left hand, right above the faint, silver crescent mark of their fated bond. A single drop of bright, crimson blood welled up. Nia held her bleeding hand over the blackened metal of the bracelet. "You survived the blade," she whispered softly into the quiet morning, a vow made not to a king, but to her mate. Now, survive the truth. The drop of blood fell, striking the charred metal. It did not sizzle. It did not explode in a blinding flash of magic. Instead, a pure, soft, silver light rippled across the surface of the metal. Like rain washing away years of grime, the thick, crusty layers of black ash began to flake and dissolve. Beneath the ruin, the original shining silver of the Lycan King's mating bracelet revealed itself, unblemished and whole. At the exact same moment, Orion inhaled a massive, ragged breath. The black veins crawling up his throat stopped abruptly. As the true mate bond was cleansed and acknowledged, the necrotic curse lost its anchor. The dark lines rapidly receded, fading back down his chest until they vanished entirely beneath his skin. The terrifying heat radiating from his body cooled. Orion's eyes flew open. The steely grey was clear, sharp, and alive. He stared up at the pale winter sky for a second, disoriented, before his gaze snapped to the woman kneeling beside him. Nia held the restored silver bracelet in her uninjured hand. Orion slowly pushed himself up. He was weak, his massive frame trembling from the aftermath of the curse. But the shadow of death was gone. He looked at the silver bracelet, then at Nia's small, steady face.
I found it.
His throat worked as he swallowed the heavy knot of emotion.
Thank you.
He did not snatch the bracelet
saved
from her.
us.
He did not issue a
I
command.
will never forget
Instead,
it.
he reached out with a shaking, dirt-caked hand and gently, almost reverently, took her bleeding palm.
You saved
He pressed
us.
his lips to her skin,
I
a
will
kiss
never
of absolute
forget it.
gratitude and unbreakable loyalty. Behind them, the captain of the guard raised his